My husband's laughter still echoes in my mind from that February afternoon, cold and dismissive like the winter wind rattling our bedroom window. "I'll put up with her for one more year, then it's over." The words sliced through the thin wall separating our bedroom from the hallway, where I stood frozen, laundry basket pressed against my chest like a shield. He was talking to his brother on speakerphone, and the casual cruelty in his voice, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenient roommate or a tiresome obligation, made my knees buckle. I set the basket down silently and backed away, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain he would hear it and discover me eavesdropping on my own obituary. Welcome to Big Sky Storytime. I hope you will like this story. Before listening to the story, I request you that if you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel and make the video a worthy one. Let's go to the story. That moment marked the beginning of what I now think of as my year of transformation, though at the time it felt more like a year of survival. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 8 years I had been Mrs. David Mitchell, a title I wore with pride even as it slowly became a cage. We met in college, fell in love over late-night philosophy discussions and cheap pizza, and married young with the kind of optimistic naivety that makes older couples smile knowingly. David was pursuing his MBA while working at a consulting firm, and I had put my own career aspirations on hold to support his ambitions, taking a part-time administrative job that paid the bills but left my journalism degree gathering dust. The first few years were good, or at least I remember them that way. We were building something together, or so I thought. But somewhere between his promotions and my increasingly invisible contributions to our household, something fundamental shifted. I became the manager of our domestic life, handling everything from paying bills to remembering his mother's birthday, while he became the star of his own show, with me relegated to the supporting cast. The emotional labor I performed daily was so seamless that it became invisible, even to me. After overhearing those devastating words, I spent 3 days in a fog of disbelief and denial. I kept replaying the conversation, searching for alternative interpretations, trying to convince myself I had misunderstood, but there was no ambiguity in "I'll put up with her for one more year." The phrase "put up with" suggested I was a burden, an annoyance to be endured rather than a partner to be cherished. The casual timeline, "one more year," implied he had been planning this exit strategy for some time, that our marriage had an expiration date I knew nothing about. On the 4th day, something inside me crystallized. I was standing in our kitchen making David's coffee exactly the way he liked it, a ritual I had performed thousands of times, when I realized I couldn't remember the last time he had asked me how I took mine. This small observation opened a floodgate of similar realizations. When had he last asked about my day with genuine interest? When had we last made a decision together rather than me simply accommodating his preferences? When had I stopped being a person with my own dreams and become merely the infrastructure supporting his? I made a decision that morning that probably saved my life, though not in the dramatic, immediate way you might expect. I decided that if David was giving himself 1 year before ending our marriage, I would give myself the same year, but I would use it differently. I wouldn't spend it trying to win back someone who saw me as a burden. Instead, I would spend it reclaiming myself, rebuilding the person I had been before I molded myself into the shape of someone else's convenience. If our marriage ended in a year, I would be ready. And if it didn't, if somehow David had a change of heart, I would be standing on solid ground, able to make clear-eyed decisions about what I actually wanted. The first step was the hardest. I started saying no. Not dramatically or confrontationally, but simply and clearly. When David casually mentioned he had invited colleagues for dinner on Friday without consulting me, Instead of scrambling to prepare a perfect meal as I usually did, I said, "That doesn't work for me. I have plans." I didn't actually have plans, but I made some. I signed up for a writing workshop I had been eyeing for months. His surprise was almost comical. "You have plans?" he asked, as if the concept of me having an independent social calendar was absurd. "Yes," I replied calmly, and left it at that. That small act of self-assertion felt revolutionary. The writing workshop became my lifeline over the following months. It met every Friday evening in a cozy bookstore basement, and those 2 hours became sacred. I wrote about everything: my marriage, my lost dreams, my anger, my hope. The instructor, a retired journalist named Margaret Chen, saw something in my work and encouraged me to pitch to local publications. "You have a voice," she told me one evening. "Don't let it go to waste." Her words were water to a plant I hadn't realized was dying of thirst. Simultaneously, I began addressing the practical realities of my situation. I met with a lawyer, discreetly during my lunch break, to understand my rights and options. I learned about asset division, spousal support, and the importance of financial independence. The consultation terrified and empowered me in equal measure. I opened my own bank account and started directing a portion of my paycheck there. I updated my resume for the first time in years and started applying for full-time positions in my field. The changes I was making didn't go unnoticed, but David's reaction was peculiar. He seemed more annoyed than concerned, as if I were rearranging furniture without his permission rather than fundamentally reshaping my life. "You're gone a lot these days," he commented one evening, looking up from his phone with mild irritation. "I have interests," I replied, marveling at how strange it felt to state something so basic. "You've been spending a lot on yourself, too," he added, referencing the workshop fee and some new professional clothes I had bought for job interviews. I reminded him that he had recently spent 3 times that amount on golf equipment without consultation. He had no response to that. 3 months into my year of transformation, I got my first article published, a personal essay about the invisible labor of maintaining relationships. It appeared in a mid-size online publication that paid modestly but had a decent readership. I didn't tell David about it, which felt both petty and protective. The piece resonated with readers, especially women who saw their own experiences reflected in my words. The comments and emails I received were overwhelming. "This is my life," one woman wrote. "I thought I was the only one who felt this way," said another. The external validation was gratifying, but more importantly, I was validating myself. I started making decisions based on what I wanted, rather than what would make things easiest for everyone else. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, particularly my college roommate Jessica, who had been gently trying to point out concerning patterns in my marriage for years. "You're different," she observed one evening over wine. "You seem more present." She was right. I was inhabiting my own life again rather than watching it from the sidelines. Around month 5, I was offered a full-time position as a staff writer for a regional lifestyle magazine. The salary was modest but respectable, and more importantly, it was mine, a paycheck earned from work that engaged my mind and utilized my skills. I accepted immediately. That evening, I told David about the job over dinner I hadn't cooked. I had stopped automatically handling all meals and had started ordering takeout or cooking only for myself several nights a week, another change he found perplexing. His reaction was complicated. There was a flicker of something, pride perhaps, but it was quickly overshadowed by concern about logistics. "What about your schedule, the house, dinner?" I looked at him calmly and said, "We'll both have to figure that out together. I'm not the household manager anymore. I'm your partner, or at least I should be." It was the closest I had come to acknowledging the fundamental imbalance in our relationship, and I saw something shift in his expression. Maybe the first real recognition that I was no longer the accommodating, invisible woman he had taken for granted. The new job was challenging and occasionally overwhelming, but I thrived on it. I was writing about local businesses, interviewing community leaders, and occasionally getting to pursue investigative pieces that scratched my journalistic itch. My byline appeared regularly, and I started building a portfolio I was proud of. I'd also started making more money, which shifted the financial dynamics in our marriage in subtle but significant ways. I was no longer economically dependent on David, and that changed how I moved through the world. Month 7 brought an unexpected development. David's company announced layoffs, and despite his seniority and performance, he was let go in a restructuring. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as I was becoming professionally established, his career stability crumbled. He was devastated, and I watched him cycle through denial, anger, and depression. Part of me, a petty, hurt part, felt a grim satisfaction, but a larger part of me felt genuine compassion. Whatever had happened between us, I didn't want to see him suffer. This is where the story could have gone in several directions. I could have seized this as an opportunity to leave, taking advantage of his vulnerability just as he had planned to abandon me. I could have played the supportive wife, reverting to old patterns in his time of crisis. Instead, I did something more complicated. I supported him as an equal partner, not as his caretaker. I listened when he wanted to talk, gave him space when he needed it, but I didn't manage his emotions or take responsibility for fixing his situation. I maintained my own job, my writing workshop, my Friday evenings, my separate bank account. David's unemployment lasted 3 months, and during that time, something interesting happened. With role reversal thrust upon us, he began to understand the texture of domestic life in a way he never had before. He handled grocery shopping and discovered it required planning and budget consciousness. He dealt with the broken dishwasher and learned that home maintenance involved research, phone calls, and scheduling. He was home when the neighbor's tree fell on our fence and had to navigate the insurance claim and contractor negotiations. All these tasks I had handled invisibly for years suddenly became visible because he was doing them. One evening, in month 9, I came home from work to find David cooking dinner. Actually cooking, not just heating something up. The kitchen was a disaster, but the effort was genuine. "How was your day?" he asked, and something in his tone was different. He actually wanted to know. I told him about a difficult interview and a looming deadline, and he listened, asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely engaged. It was such a small thing, but it felt seismic. "I read your article," he said suddenly, "the one about invisible labor." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. I hadn't told him about that piece, which had been published months ago. "How did you—" "Your byline is public, Sarah. I Googled you." He looked uncomfortable, embarrassed even. "I should have been reading your work all along. I should have asked about it. I should have celebrated it with you." The conversation that followed was long and painful and necessary. David admitted he had taken me for granted, that he had stopped seeing me as a full person somewhere along the way. He apologized for the phone call I had overheard. I finally told him about it, and explained, though not in a way that excused it, that he had been feeling trapped and resentful about things that had nothing to do with me, and I had become a convenient target for his unhappiness. He had been miserable in his job, felt pressured by societal expectations, and was too cowardly to examine his own contribution to his dissatisfaction, so he blamed me instead. I don't know if I can forgive you for planning to leave without even talking to me about what was wrong, I said honestly. I don't know if we can fix this. I'm not sure I even want to try. The old Sarah would have rushed to reassure him, to make his discomfort easier. The new Sarah sat with the hard truth and let him sit with it too. I understand, he said quietly. I wouldn't forgive me either, but I want you to know that watching you this year, watching you become yourself again, or maybe become yourself more fully than ever, has shown me what I was destroying. I fell in love with a smart, ambitious, creative woman, and I somehow convinced you to shrink yourself down into someone who made my life easier. That's unforgivable. The acknowledgement mattered, but I had learned over the past 9 months that acknowledgement without change was meaningless. Words are easy, David. What are you actually willing to do differently? Over the next few weeks, he showed me. He got a new job, one with better work-life balance and less travel, even though it paid slightly less. He started therapy to address his own issues instead of making them my problem. He took over specific household responsibilities permanently, not as a favor to me, but as his equal share. He read my articles and asked about my work. He planned dates and remembered important occasions. But here's the thing about betrayal and transformation. They change you in ways you can't undo. The woman who overheard her husband casually planning her disposal was gone, and in her place was someone stronger, but also warier. I had learned to value myself independent of David's estimation of me. I had built a life that was mine, not ours, and I liked that life. I liked the person I had become. Month 12 arrived with spring flowers and complicated feelings. The arbitrary deadline David had set, unknowingly giving me the same timeline I had given myself, came and went without fanfare. Our marriage hadn't ended, but it hadn't exactly been saved either. It had been fundamentally renegotiated. We were in couples therapy, working through layers of resentment and rediscovering whether we actually liked each other as the people we currently were, not the people we had been 8 years ago. 1 year after overhearing those devastating words, David and I sat in our backyard on a warm evening, each reading, me editing an article, him reviewing a work proposal. He reached over and took my hand, and I let him, though I noticed I didn't automatically squeeze back the way I once would have. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on us, even when I had already given up." I looked at him steadily. I didn't do this for us. I did it for me. The fact that you started doing your own work and were still together is almost incidental to that. It wasn't romantic, but it was honest, and honesty had become the foundation of whatever we were building. I had learned that you can't save a relationship by sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's comfort. I had learned that self-preservation isn't selfish, it's essential. I had learned that the story I was writing about my own life was more important than any role I played in someone else's narrative. 2 years later, I can report that David and I are still married, but our marriage bears little resemblance to what it was. We're partners in a more genuine sense, two independent people who choose each other daily, not out of obligation or convenience, but because we enhance each other's lives. He's proud of my work and shows it. I respect his efforts to be better while maintaining boundaries that protect my hard-won independence. We split domestic labor equitably, make decisions jointly, and maintain individual identities alongside our coupled one. But I'll be honest, there are still moments when I remember that phone call, that casual cruelty, and I feel the scar tissue pull. Some betrayals leave permanent marks. What I've learned is that you can build something new on scarred ground, but you never forget what's buried there. I don't trust as easily as I once did, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing. Trust should be earned and maintained, not freely given and carelessly assumed.
The real gift of that terrible year wasn't saving my marriage. It was saving myself. I'm now a senior writer at the magazine, working on a book proposal about emotional labor and identity in modern relationships. I have a career I love, friendships I've nurtured, and a sense of self that isn't dependent on anyone else's validation. If my marriage ended tomorrow, I would grieve, but I would survive and ultimately thrive. That certainty is more valuable than any romantic gesture or anniversary celebration. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't overheard that phone call, if I had remained oblivious to David's countdown to our end. Would he have actually left? Would I have been blindsided, devastated, unprepared? Or would the marriage have simply continued its slow decline into mutual resentment and disconnection? I'll never know, and I've made peace with that uncertainty. What I do know is this: the best year of my marriage was the one where I stopped trying to save it and started trying to save myself. The best decision I made wasn't fighting for us, it was fighting for me. And the most important lesson I learned wasn't about love or commitment or perseverance in the face of adversity. It was simpler and more radical than that. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you should never have to earn your own space in your own life. David and I have talked about having children someday, but I'm in no rush. I want to make sure that if I become a mother, I don't disappear into that role the way I once disappeared into being a wife. I want to model for any daughters I might have what it looks like to maintain your identity, even as you take on new ones. I want to show any sons I might have what equal partnership actually looks like, so they don't grow up expecting someone to manage their lives for them. The story I overheard David telling his brother had an ending. One more year, then it's over. But stories are rarely that simple, and people are capable of more change than we sometimes give them credit for, both negative and positive. The man who said those words did work to become someone different, someone better. But more importantly, I did the work to become someone who would never again tolerate being merely put up with by anyone, including and especially my own husband. If there's a moral to this story, it's not about forgiveness or second chances or the redemptive power of love. It's about the non-negotiable importance of self-respect and the transformative power of reclaiming your own life. It's about the fact that sometimes the best way to save a relationship is to stop making it your entire existence. It's about understanding that you are the protagonist of your own story, not a supporting character in someone else's. That February afternoon, listening to my husband laugh about enduring me for one more year, I felt my world end. What I didn't realize then was that it wasn't an ending at all. It was the painful, necessary beginning of something better. Not better in the neat, romantic sense of a fairy tale, but better in the messy, complicated, real way that actual growth and change always are. I lost a marriage that day, but I found myself. And in the end, that was the trade I needed to make. If you like this story of mine, please leave a nice comment and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.